You may be wondering what I wondered when McKinsey asked me if I would talk at this. What does an industrial products company from Canton, Ohio have to do with a great study from McKinsey and the Brookings Institute? The answer to that question is the experience we've had over the last 20 years, I think, validates, reinforces the conclusion that is set out in this. I'd like to just take a few minutes and I'll share with you that story. If you start, Tim... Oh, we're not up? Do I need to do something technologically to bring it up?
I think they're going to do something back there. But...
Well, let me talk this. At this point, the slides are less important than they will be in a moment. Timken is an industrial company. We were founded 113 years ago by a guy who invented the tapered roller bearing, and we've grown into a multi-product, multi-technology industrial products company. When people think of bearings, they usually think of either roller skates that their kids have or cars and wheels in cars. In fact, Timken makes products that propel the Mars rover. We make products that are at the bottom of the deepest oil well. We make products that result in the lights coming on in Beijing every day, and that is the business that we're in, $5 billion around the world, and operate 20,000 people in some 30 countries. I'm going to go. Do you want me to go ahead, or you want me?
It's coming up.
It's coming? Okay. And in fact, if you look through the 20th century, we were part of the developing of the industrial economy. I've actually done a separate talk where I compared us to called us the Intel of the mechanical revolution, to the point that we had Timken Inside developed in 1930, long before Intel ever thought of Intel Inside. This slide is probably the critical one to the presentation because it captures the story of Timken and how we've wrestled with the issues that James and Katie laid out in their report. This is a study, or a graph of return on invested capital over a 50-year period. And if you look at it, and you look at it in phases, you see this is the first piece. If you can't see the bottom, is prior to 1980. You can see what happens from a strong industrial company that innovated over 80 years, high returns, high teens returns over a consistent period of time, consistent profitability over that period of time. Then you can see what happened when the world globalized. And in fact, that little peak in 1984 was when I came from Stanford to Ohio and chose to go into manufacturing at that point. And during that period of time, we were driving to, I'll say, catch up. We were adopting the best practices from around the world. We actually built a new steel mill to improve the quality of the raw material to our product. And you can see the impact of that because as we got to world scale of operational performance, in fact, we got back to the kind of performance that you would hope to in a great industrial company. Unfortunately, when the inflection point is the economic crisis in Asia of the 1997, 1998, suddenly with revenue flat, we saw our profitability plummet, and in fact, our stock went from $42 to $14 in about a 15-month period of time. And that caused us to really step back and reflect on what it took to compete as a manufacturing company, and launched a transformation of the company that I think reflects the McKinsey results. The essence of the company in 1999 was we were the world leader in making tapered roller bearings and alloy steel. We made things. We were a manufacturer's manufacturer. And that was the essence of the weakness of the company, is we thought making things was important. What we recognized was we're in existence only to create value for customers. Therefore, it was what we knew that was more important than what we made. And so we went to the market and we resegmented the company, not around products, but around markets, and said, how do we take our knowledge to your market and create new value? And in that period of time, we've doubled the revenues of the company. We've grown 500% in the industrial aftermarket, 400% in emerging markets, 250% in the energy industry, and we've dropped our automotive participation from being 50% of the company to being less than 20% of the company. So a radical market portfolio change, which then drove a radical product portfolio change. And again, in 1999, we made tapered roller bearings and alloy steel. Today, we have more than 20 product lines. We make things from gearboxes that are as big as this room that drive a big military ship, to the military economy, to small instrument bearings that are a millimeter in diameter, to we have a steel mill, million-ton-a-year specialty steel mill that has 30% of what it sold last year didn't exist 5 years ago. So a radical product innovation, and in fact, the nice way to talk about that is $40 million of the output of that steel mill in Canton, Ohio was exported to China last year. And in fact, that mill is going through a $300 million reinvestment right now, hence the comment about job growth in Canton, Ohio. And that translates to geographies. We recognized that the world is flat, Tom Friedman, and that the opportunities around the world were going to be very different. And so we began to focus on emerging markets where the infrastructure was being put in place. In that period of time, our employment in Asia went from 1,000 people to over 5,000 people. Our revenue in emerging markets grew 4.5-fold over that period of time. And it created a different face of the company as we go around the world, because if you're a knowledge company and you're going to be global, you're going to have a very different workforce. And again, a way to capture that, we privatized a communist factory in Ploiest, Romania that made high-tech industrial bearings. We discovered in the back of the factory was an engineering department that was among the best in the world, underemployed engineers. And that is today our global center of design for large industrial products. Whether we're installing it in Gary, Indiana, or Kunming, China, the product is designed at that facility in Romania. And then all across that was a recommitment to performance, a commitment that said, if you're going to succeed in the world, you've got to be the best in the world. And if you're going to be the best in the world, then you've got to understand what factors of performance have to be the best in the world, and committed ourselves to get there. So 85% reduction in accidents across the world, a dramatic improvement in customer service across the world, a $250 million investment in an ERP-based rethinking of the supply chain systems of the company. And the bottom line, if you look at the right-hand side, is a dramatic rebound in profitability to the point that in 2011, 2 years after the Great Recession, we were at record profitability. 2012, assuming nothing falls off the rails in the next 2 months, will be our second best year of history, in our history, again, despite a global economic slowdown. And in fact, as we tested that, we went back and created a peer group of industrial, the top 40 industrial companies in the S&P 400. The light blue in this graph is the median performance. The dark blue is top quartile. And so if you look at when we improved ourselves in 1998, we got ourselves all the way up to average. Which we were feeling pretty good about it. But if you look at it in perspective, we got ourselves all the way up to average, whereas in comparison, 2011 was not only top quartile, it was top decile. And it is a factor of recognizing we operate in a global economy. Now, let me translate that in terms of what I would call some takeaways, both for manufacturers, and then I'll do the same thing for policymakers. Message number one, Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, said it's all about having the right people on the bus. And at all levels of the company, at the top part of the company, all the way down to the guys running the machines, you've got to have the best people in the world. Competition among companies, competition among countries is all about having the best people and investing in those people and creating that knowledge that you take to market. Secondly, and this is one that I think gets controversial when you talk about Steve Jobs and making iPads. Manufacturing companies exist because they make the world a better place. And if you can't measure that value, you won't succeed, because you get caught up in counting the number of widgets you make as opposed to counting the profitability that you achieve for your customers, which then gives you a right to exist and to be profitable. Again, just Tom Friedman coined this this comment, the world is flat, and he did it in a very populist way. I can remember one of my guys jumped out of sickbed when he read in Tom Friedman's book, why would you make anything in Canton, China that you could, or in Canton, Ohio that you could make in Canton, China? I actually validated Tom's never been to Canton, Ohio. But, you know, when you stop and you think about that, as a manufacturer, that is fundamental. You've got to accept that the world is flat. We live in a global world. And I think the McKinsey report does a great job of providing a guide to where you should do what in the world. And if something needs to be made close to raw material, you better be there. If something needs to be made with low-cost labor, you better be there. If something needs to be made close to the market, you better be there, because if you don't, somebody else is. And you know the story of the lion and the antelope. The antelope gets up in the morning thinking he's got to be faster than the fastest lion. The lion's got to get up in the morning and says, I got to be faster than the slowest antelope, otherwise one becomes dinner and the other one starves. Well, the reality is, and I think Katie showed it in her graph of Caterpillar versus the Chinese equipment manufacturer, there is somebody out there gunning for you. And if you don't make those decisions, if we don't make those decisions, then we will be history. And that's fundamental for everybody to understand, that you've got to make those decisions and drive to success, because what we do is important. And again, I think the McKinsey report captured a lot of the value around manufacturing. It's not just jobs. It is R&D. It is the development of high-skill workforces. That drives universities, and that builds the wealth of the country. But as I shared with Katie before, I've got a little deeper sense of that. From my sense, America sent 2 armies overseas in the 1990s. One went to the Middle East to deal with dysfunctional governments and fought a fabulous cause. The other one went to China and India. And they did their own quiet conversion for global development and global peace. And the fact that the lady I hired in China as our first employee in 1996 is today supporting her daughter, who's a junior at Washington University in St. Louis, I think says it all about the relationship that has been built on the back of manufacturing global trade, which I believe is a foundation to a stable global political structure. Now let me turn around and be a little more risky and talk to the policymakers. Again, a strong manufacturing sector is vital to America. I mean, I think that is just really a powerful message to take away. And again, the McKinsey report captures a lot of the statistics around it. I just add to that, to the policymakers, you know, we're in this together. So often in the heat of the political race, the manufacturers who are investing in Asia and that sort of thing are criticized, are held up for ridicule as being the enemy. You know, we're in this together. We're all Americans, and we're trying to build a great country and trying to build the strength of our businesses at the same time. But the reality is the world's flat. And you know, the quote that came out in the political rhetoric, I actually heard it from the Secretary of Commerce here about 4 weeks ago, that we have to get rid of this tax credit for shipping jobs overseas, which again is, from my point of view, populist pablum. We've got to get underneath it and understand what does it take for manufacturing companies in America to be successful and build the infrastructure around that. And again, I'll share with you just a quick takeaway. In the last 10 years, Timken's built 6 plants in Asia, across India and China, because we've been growing there. We've gone from employing 1,000 people to over 5,000 people. It's now a quarter of our workforce. And so that sounds like I'm the king of offshores in mechanical products. But at the same time, we've grown our exports from the United States to $660 million last year, which accounts for a quarter of our employment in North America, because we've learned how to be successful on a global stage, and American workers can be successful on a global stage if, in fact, we make those investments and we make them effectively. So from policymakers' point of view, and I think the comment was made, you have to create a level playing field. But I chose a different word here. You have to demand a level playing field, because this is not just what we do in America. This is the rules that we set with our fellow countries on how we compete. from manufacturers, things like anti-dumping, intellectual property, the ability, the aforementioned discussion on visas. Those are important from other countries to allow us to compete with them. But at the same time, we have to look at our own world, and we have to create the environment for success. Like Gardner said it very, very, very well. This isn't about picking winners. It's about creating the ecosystem that allows us to win or lose, and therefore, I believe in America, and I believe if you create that ecosystem, that we can be successful. And that ecosystem doesn't include a regulatory structure that National Association of Manufacturers puts a 20% headwind at us, the highest tax rate in the world. I mean, there's a lot of those issues that we've got to work through together if, in fact, we're going to continue to have the strongest manufacturing sector in the world. And finally, I'll close simply with an advertisement for what Bruce, I think, was lobbying through the whole presentation. It is all about people. It's about people on an international scale, not just a national scale. And we in America have won in the 20th century because we built the best educational system in the world to create the people who would win. As we look to propel that into the 21st century, we've got to make the investments in that. We've got to create the policies that propel the highest skilled people in the world, because without that, we have nothing with which to compete. So again, thank you to McKinsey, thank you for Brookings for the opportunity to tell my story, and thank you for a great framework for us to think about the manufacturing challenge.